All
There we go.
right.
Just took a little bit. Okay, great.
Good. We are set to go. And this is I call to order the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on the Planning, POCD, March 27th, 2025 at 9:07 a.m. And can't quite see people, but the members I see present are Tony Piglatelli from the consulting group, Tony Moran, Chris Kiefner, Katie Frattoni, John Carrington,
Maria Capriolo,
Maria Capriello,
Carlita Cotton.
Carlita Cotton. Hello, Carlita.
And then we have Ron Shuren.
Ron Shuren. Oh, yes, right next to me. And Laura Nagel.
Laura is from FHI, and Ryan Ellsworth and Jennifer Kaufman.
Okay.
So should we approve the minutes?
Yes. Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so we have minutes from February 27th.
Move to approve.
Moved by Chris.
Second.
Second by Carlita. All in favor?
Abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Okay. All in favor, one abstention. We have an opportunity for public comment. I don't see any public here today.
And there were no communications.
No communications. And so now we can start our vision and goal setting session.
All right, this is Ad Hoc Committee meeting number 5, and the department heads and the boards and committees through their role as the working group also completed this vision and goal setting exercise. So Tony, I'm going to kind of hand it over. Tony Pignatelli, Tony from IMEG, I'm going to hand this over to you for an introduction.
Fantastic. I'm going to introduce what we're doing today, not myself, as we've met 5 times. So pleasure to see you all this morning. Thank you for turning out. Chris, thank you for joining us again. As Jennifer mentioned, this will be a visioning exercise. We're going to cover, just provide an update on the work that we've been doing since we last met, and then dive into the discussion, which will be interactive. And then we'll cover next steps so that you know what we'll be up to moving ahead, and hopefully you can help us get the word out about some of these upcoming events so we can turn members of the public out at the upcoming workshop in particular. Oops, pardon. For the progress update, the focus of our work currently has been engagement. We are encouraging people to complete the survey and participate at the upcoming workshop on April 5th. And we're using a variety of promotional materials, including this this door hanger that's shown here, which Jennifer will talk about in a moment. As of last night, we've received 213 responses on the survey. We're feeling good about that, but we would love to have more people complete the survey. There'll be a number of pop-up events throughout the community where we're going to be meeting people where they're at and encouraging them to complete the survey. And we'd really love your help in doing that as well. You know, if you're talking to your neighbors or running into people when you're out and about at events, we would greatly encourage you to let them know that we are in the midst of this planning process and that we really want to hear from them through completion of the survey and then attendance at the public workshop, which is scheduled for April 5th at 9:30 at the Mansfield Middle School.
I did want to remind folks to encourage folks in your networks to complete the survey. We just want a variety of folks to complete this. And I did want to talk a little bit about the engagement that we're doing on our department level. First of all, we're actually partnering with the Human Services, our Human Services Department. I've been to the Senior Center. Michael Stankoff has been to the library they have an after-school program. I'm going to Story Hour tomorrow. We've got hopefully a volunteer at the Mansfield Public School fundraiser breakfast on Saturday. We're going to Rolling Hills. We'll be meeting with Katie and just encouraging folks to do the survey. We are looking to go door to door to some of the neighborhoods that we generally don't hear from. For example, down at Thornbush, we want to hit Valley View. I'd like to go to Woods Edge Apartment and Foster Drive just to encourage those folks. We are working with our digital navigators to have them help us do this, have people who aren't comfortable with doing an online survey. We're making paper copies available. So if you could help us get the word out. Specifically Yukon. Michael Stankoff from my office is working with CT Innovation House. It's a learning community, and they are developing their own outreach strategy for the Yukon community, and that includes faculty, staff, and students. They'll be tabling at the Student Union. They're working with AAUP and UCB and the Graduate Student Union to kind of do a push for the survey. We are being featured in Yukon Today, their public relations piece, so to try to get folks out there. We're going to work with the Daily Digest. So we're out there, we're trying to meet people where they are. Oh, the landfill, we're having the attendant hand out our like half-day sheets, half-page sheets to folks who come in to deal with their trash. So
Yeah. You mentioned there are also going to be paper copies in addition to online. Is that
yes, so,
correct?
upon request.
Upon request, yeah.
Yep. So
Somebody told me that they had a problem with the online survey. They wanted to go back after having, and then they were unable to do that. I don't know if you've encountered that from anyone else.
we've had a few errors, and when you're doing the survey online, it is a little bit of a challenge. But we've only had 2 phone calls in my office, and we've tried to walk people through that. So, I mean, it's not going to be perfect. Some folks are going to have problems, but we are happy to help anyone walk them through it, and also, happy to sit with them at a laptop or provide a paper copy. So, I feel like we're doing a lot of public engagement.
Agreed. And we're looking through the response rates, and the majority of individuals, close to 100%, if not 100%, are completing the survey and able to make it all the way through. There is, if people have sized their screen such that it's enlarged, or their viewer or their browser, I guess I would say, then sometimes it can be hard for them to navigate all the way down. And unfortunately, it's not something that we have a whole lot of control over, but that is something that has been brought to our attention. So we've just been counseling people to try to minimize to the regular size so that they can move through the complete survey. Or move through the entire survey. Okay. Review of previous plans. We've been looking at content from previous plans completed since 2015. We're not going to repeat, replicate those. But we've been pairing our review of those with what we're hearing from you all to identify those actions and any relevant findings that we could wrap into this POCD. So it's reflective of all the work that's been happening in the community and the larger regional context, the work that's been happening regionally. The benchmarking analysis, for those of you who completed it, we hugely appreciate your contributions. We know that was a very big lift. And it was a really important part of our work to understand where actions stand that were in the last plan. And we have a critical mass of responses from you all. We're analyzing those results, and we have noticed some similar patterns, not so much in both the actions, but for the purposes of today's conversation, I'm just going to let you know that in addition to gaining clarity on those actions that are completed, which are ongoing, we've also identified that many people feel there's an opportunity to, more clearly distinguish the actions for easier implementation, and then also reduce, refine, and reframe. So the plan is a bit more, I think, easier to digest for users and easier to implement for those who are responsible for tackling the actions. And some of that could be done through better identifying some of the responsible parties, particularly for those actions where there's overlap. Okay, we're gonna jump into our visioning discussion. So vision statements, they really provide the framework for the entire plan. It tells the reader what the plan is about, really what it focuses on up front. And it's really helpful for our team to know if the vision statement that was included in your current plan, if it's effective, if you all think it's still relevant. It's really a good starting point for us as we go through the update. By nature, visioning conversations are messy. They can get a little bit unwieldy. People have a lot to say, and that's fantastic. We really appreciate that. We want to assure you that, we have limited time with you today, so we don't really want to get into all of the nuances of what you want to see within the plan, but we do want to hear from you about some of the priorities, some of those things that have come up since the last plan update that we really need to focus on and dig into. And we may come back to you to ask for additional information. We're not trying to be rude, but we do need to make sure that we stay on task so we can tackle each chapter. That's how we'll structure today's conversation. We're going to dive into each chapter within your existing plan. And so we want to make sure we cover all of those chapters, and that everyone has a chance to contribute. So with that, I'm going to change here. So this is and I'll let you know, and I think Jennifer mentioned this. We conducted a similar exercise earlier this week with the department heads. And that was a really, really helpful conversation. There was a lot of insight, unique perspectives from the individuals who were, working for the city or working for the town, pardon. And then we met, as Jennifer mentioned, I'm losing track of the days. I think it was on Tuesday. We met Tuesday with the boards, committees, and commissions. And in that group, it was a larger group. And again, we got a lot of great input, and we actually broke out into two smaller breakout rooms so that we could have a little bit more robust conversation, because again, that's a very large group. So shown here is the existing vision statement from Mansfield 2025. So this is your existing vision statement. I am not going to read it. We did summarize this on the next page. A couple of things. One, if you're flipping through the plan, this is the vision statement. You can read through it, but it's very long. It's a very lengthy vision statement. So our hope is really that we can distill this a bit, so it's more accessible, and some of the key areas of focus are called out in a more simple way. So here is the summary. Again, high list of topics that the vision statement covers, and I'm going to read it and then ask you all, do any of these items no longer ring true? Do they no longer seem relevant? And then also, what's missing or needs to be adjusted? Combining the enjoyment of rural character and the benefits of a university community, Mansfield in 2035 will be a place of environmental stewardship, active farming, advanced learning, cultural enrichment, innovative businesses, walkable villages, rural settlements, natural beauty, and the best schools in the region.
Could I make a comment on this?
Please, Mayor.
Having now been at the center of a major controversy over the use of the term rural character, can we do something about that phrase? I was told it had been totally deleted from this document and others in particular because of a lawsuit the town lost about discouraging a city dweller to move here because of our rural character, which was perceived as being white and discouraging people of color. We either have to eliminate this term, reuse it, or I have to publicly apologize for saying that the Planning and Development Program has dropped it from its consideration.
Mayor, yes, that has come up a number of times. I was not aware of the lawsuit, so that's helpful background. So rural is a place type similar to urban. So Jennifer has suggested perhaps defining rural and not using it in the context of character, which can be somewhat ambiguous and mean different things to different people. Does that seem like it would be sufficient, Mayor?
It might be, but frankly, I would put university. I know that there are people in my community who are going to object to this, but in fact, what distinguishes our community from others is not its rural character. We are surrounded by rural towns. We are distinguished by our benefits of a university community in a rural landscape. I would do something along those lines, Frank, but literally, having
We
been
need-
in
we
the
need a
middle
synonym
of a
for
major
character.
controversy over the use of these two words together, has made me very sensitive to this issue.
Moreover, there are about 3 references to rural on this list of 8, and I wonder if that's an overemphasis. And
No
just,
kidding.
yeah.
Yes, and that is something that we've been hearing from other individuals throughout the engagement. And so maybe it's not, and I understand, Mayor, the concerns about rural character, but maybe it's just highlighting some of the other aspects, identities that exist within town.
What it
And
means
giving them,
is that there are people in this town who don't want development. That's what it means.
Mhm.
And
So if I may, I think this, I mean, I think rural is, I think, as Tony said, I think Tony, FHI Tony, has said, we really need to define rural. I think rural means different things to different people. And I've had a lot of conversations about this over the past few weeks, as I'm sure many of us have. So the lawsuit first, it's my understanding that it was not a lawsuit against the town, it was against the housing authority, and I don't know a lot of details about that. I'll need to look into that. I think we need to define things that people value about Mansfield, and I think when you look up a definition of rural, characteristics are low population density, open spaces and nature. Rural places often feature vast open spaces, farmland, forests, and other natural environments, and fewer amenities. Rural areas may have limited access to amenities like shopping centers, hospitals, and cultural attractions. So I think Mansfield, when I talk about Mansfield, one of the fun facts that I use is that 2 Manhattans can fit in Mansfield. So we're a community of 45 square miles. And we have nodes that are not rural, but we also have nodes in Mansfield that are rural. If you look at Northeast Mansfield, or if you look at right around the Stearns Farm, I think a lot of people would say that that's a rural landscape. So when I talk to people about Mansfield and how we're planning for Mansfield, we talk about smart growth. And so we have these smart growth areas where we're trying to direct development, and we're keeping sort of a rural landscape less dense, forest working farmland in other areas. So I think that, in my opinion, that has to be emphasized, but I think we're going to hear a lot from the community about that. And I see that Ron Sher.
Yeah, just somehow on that list, although you reference university community at the top, something among those bullet points referencing our role as a center of a major American university, which I don't see in that list of it.
So, well, this is a summary from 2015. This is
Okay.
not our future vision.
Okay.
This reflects where we were in 2015, not where we want to be in 2035 or 2040.
Well, I think it'd be easy to find a synonym for character and take that word out. In fact, there's a state statute that says that the word character cannot be used to deny any zoning request.
Right. We're not allowed to use, because character is so subjective, right?
Yes.
So
Let's just get rid of that word, and landscape is a good word.
Right.
Attributes, rural attributes.
Rural attributes, rural anything but character for 2025.
Until those other words get excised.
Is there anything missing from this list, in your opinion?
Well, I'd agree with Ron. The university has to go into the bullet points.
Yep.
I think I've said this at the other working groups, but I think housing is something we're hearing a lot about, diverse housing options.
Okay.
I think there has to be something in there about diversity in the community as well. I mean, one of the things that has really impressed me is I have door knocked registered voters, which tells you they're citizens, is the tremendous ethnic diversity in our community.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we have one wonderful, it's, the cultural enrichment has also really got to be emphasized in some way. Music and arts has got to be specific. And
Agreed.
actually, sports ought to be in there as well.
At the risk of being redundant from yesterday, the whatever day it was, the innovative businesses. I just think it's important to have, I mean, yes, innovation, great, but successful businesses and stable businesses.
For the benefit of this group, thank you, Chris. For the benefit of this group, there was some discussion yesterday, 2 days ago, about the use of best schools in the region and feeling as if that places Mansfield in competition with other communities. And there was a request to, rather than emphasize best schools in the region, identify or use another adjective, quality schools, award-winning schools, something of that sort.
Yeah, I think the term that won it for me, and I actually was the one who brought up I object to the word best, but excellent schools was, I thought, good. I think award-winning schools is silly because it counts on somebody else giving us awards on their standards, not ours. We should be determining how we make our own schools excellent.
We might want to use the phrase that the schools use, and that is schools educating the whole child for citizenship in the world. I don't know.
For
Thank you,
businesses, would you want thriving businesses?
For me personally, I just want stable businesses. I don't know what thriving necessarily means. If they're still here, some days Mansfield Supply looks like it's thriving. Other days it looks like nobody has anything that breaks. But that's fine, Ron. I'm easy. Another comment that came up too, I think is worth repeating, is I think it was on here. Thoughtful development, thoughtful growth, not development. I object to the word development, but thoughtful growth. And it may not belong on this particular page, but it came up somewhere, and it seems to me it was here. And I thought it was a very sensible thing to put in.
Yeah, we could spend all day on this slide, I think, but what does I guess, what's thoughtful mean?
It means doing what we're doing right now, thinking about it, and not just willy-nilly stuff, not, for example, no zoning, even if people object to the, the blanket zoning, or whatever it's called, movable zones. It's thoughtful zoning. It's thinking about how you want things to develop. It's exactly what this plan is trying to make us do.
Sure.
My feeling after participating in the Northwest Mansfield plan was that it may be an opportunity to just highlight how, and I am certain that you all are doing this, but perhaps within the plan, just emphasizing how smart growth and targeting growth with some design standards in select areas does help to preserve open space in other areas. And just really making that connection explicitly clear, that supporting growth in targeted areas is what allows for that coexistence of rural with other more dense place types.
Yeah, I agree with that, as long as you do something to actually protect the other areas, or they're the next victims of the development.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm going to move us. Yes. We have someone else who wanted to comment before we jump to the next slide. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to discuss some of the activities that have happened within the community since 2015 And then we're going to dive into a discussion where we're going to get specific about things like open space and community services. So over to you, Jennifer.
Okay, I don't know that we need to explain this to this group. I think you're
Okay.
very familiar with this, but just a quick highlight. We've had infrastructure improvements, lots of housing growth, demographics. We have, Yukon has grown. We have missing segments of the population. I call it the missing middle population. We now have a downtown. We have a new elementary school, and we have a number of facility challenges. And then next slide, Tony.
Jennifer, one part of the new elementary school is that we've closed 2 others.
Right, and that's identified in that facilities challenges that we do have, we have aging facilities and then 2 vacant elementary schools.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, if we want to talk a little bit more about this, I just felt like this group knew, was intimately aware of what's changed since 2015. But Chris, what were you going to say?
Yeah, was it on the last one? Go back one slide. Were there 2 pages of what's changed? Yes.
Yeah.
Facility challenges. The town faces challenges with inadequate buildings. I think that's kind of overstated. I think there are people who would like to see more elaborate buildings, but is what we have right now truly and honestly inadequate? I am personally not convinced that that's the case. And that makes it sound like it's a broad sweep of everything. And I think it should be a little more focused if it's said at all.
Yeah, maybe aging.
Chris, I think that you haven't, like the elementary schools, our buildings look a lot better than they actually are. And you haven't heard what's really wrong with some of these, the town hall, for example, what the problem is there, not to mention public works. But
inadequate really seems a mischaracterization, especially if you go to other towns and see that they seem to somehow cope just fine in Wellington with a town hall that's the size of our, the dog pound. It's all about perspective, and I know that there's a desire to jazz things up, but I just don't think that we are in the.
I think Jennifer has a good suggestion. Aging. How about aging buildings?
Yeah, I would say aging is part of it. I
Nothing
think,
true about that.
well, they're definitely aging. Aged, not even aging. They are already
Aging
aged.
buildings will eventually get ancient.
But I think besides the objective truth that they are aging and have aged, I think perhaps a way to address the observation Chris is raising is, I think the big point is whether or not at this exact cross-section in time, I guess the adequacy of today can be debated. I think what we're really concerned with is that on a going forward basis, meeting anticipated future needs, the capacity of our existing facilities to do that. So I think some verbiage around the fact that they are aged or aging and their capacity to meet future needs is in real question. I think that's the way I would frame it.
And I would encourage, along with this, to not just think of it as buildings alone. As I've had discussions with you, Ryan, I think one of our biggest shortcomings when the school needed to be built was finding a site. Well, and again, in my view, we should have already had a site. This should have been on the radar long ago, and we should have landed easily in an appropriate spot. So if there's some way to include not just the buildings, but also, if we had more space for the firehouse, for example, or whatever might be the next need, more options. I don't know how to put that, but I think it should be in there again, not just the buildings, but the land.
I think I think we do have facility challenges, and maybe looking at the word inadequate and out. So just maybe putting it a little bit of a positive spin. We need to, what the
Yes.
bottom line is we need to plan for our facilities.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And again, this is really to tee us up for the conversation where we're going to dive into some of the specifics. We just wanted, again, many of you are familiar with what's changed and the work that you all have been doing and the town has been doing since 2015. That was really the intent of these two slides. And Jennifer, did you have an opportunity to cover these items?
No, but I'm just going to quickly, changing lifestyles. We had a pandemic. Technology is shaping how we're workshopping and engaging with the community. We have done a lot of work on our pedestrian and transportation improvements, where we have really connected, especially the northern part of Mansfield. And if the sidewalks, we have a great sidewalk and multi-use path infrastructure. If it's not already built, it's going to be built or funded to be built. Our economic situation is different from 2015. We have stabilized state revenues, at least today, but there is this huge rise in housing cost. We've preserved 1,000 acres of farmland and 200 acres of open space. And so we continue to have a commitment to natural resources conservation and land-based activities. And we have a strong focus on sustainability with our being twice certified as a silver sustainable CT community. And we are on track for gold certification this year. So that's what I see there.
Does it make any sense to add some uncertainty due to national changes?
Mayor, that came up in the context of, well, as we move through these, each of the slides has a value statement from the existing plan. And in a number of them, they talk about some of the fiscal challenges or trying to balance desires for services or infrastructure with some of these, without overburdening the tax base. And there is also some acknowledgement of like the state and federal state and federal funding that the town is getting. And so I think people have pointed to those areas like a need to acknowledge that it may be uncertainty in terms of the funding that you all are going to be receiving.
Okay. We're on to the first that we just sort of covered the introduction to the plan, but now the second main chapter of our existing plan is about natural systems. So I'll hand it over to Tony Pignatelli.
Thank you. So each of the slides are set up the same. We have 9 slides, one for each chapter. Each of them are laid out in the same way. So let me just orient you to what's here. We have the chapters that this chapter includes, so natural systems, so topography, soils, water resources. I won't read them all, but these are the topics that are addressed within the chapter. And this is a value statement at the top, which I'll read in a moment. And, to move our conversation along, we really want to know, since 2015, what are the key issues and priorities that may not be reflected in this value statement that you feel like are new, have recently emerged, that we need to address within the plan? And again, we're not going to have time to really delve into all of the nuances, but if you can kind of give us that, top line, what should we be looking at? What should we be focusing in on? Then we can come back to you. We can dig into what we're hearing from the public on that topic to really get a better understanding of what should be included in the plan. The second question here, how can this chapter support or advance your work? This is a question that we asked of the department heads, and we reframed it slightly for the boards, committees, and commissions. We understand that, many of you have other jobs, and, you're not necessarily directly doing the work of the town, but as citizens, based on what your priorities are, what your subject matter expertise is, what you're bringing to this group, and to the community as a whole, we want to know, like, how could the chapter be better designed to better realize some of what your priorities are as subject matter experts in a particular area. So natural systems, preserve the rural and natural character of the town. There it is again. It's everywhere, Mayor. It's everywhere. Through continued preservation of open space, better management of existing natural areas, and concentration of growth in and around existing developed areas.
If we could just substitute landscape for character, I would be much happier. Because in fact, this community does not want a rural character. It does not want to drive an hour to a hospital. It does not want to have birthing centers within 20 minutes closed. It does not want to have to drive 45 minutes to a grocery store. It does not want what really constitutes a rural character. They don't want their kids more than 20 minutes on a school bus. 45 minutes is a real stretch. This is a town that wants to live like a suburb and claim it's a rural character. It does not make sense.
Thank you, Mayor. In that vein, we also heard from people, there's a desire for complete streets, opportunities for active transportation, connectivity, and then how does that, there has to be trade-offs. If that is something that's desired, then there is some compromise of some of the, even if we're just talking about streets, there needs to be a shoulder there on the street that takes up some of that rural space. So, anyways, yes, understood.
Would the phrase natural character bouncing off of natural systems make more sense than rural character? Just take out the rural. Preserve the natural character of the town.
I
almost think we could get rid of the whole it's more preserve or.
Open spaces and natural character.
Yeah, or natural resources.
You could just
Natural
start with continued.
Yeah, I think.
Start with continued preservation of open space, better management, concentration of growth.
That sounds better.
And I'd this goes back to the previous slide, but to say, we just call everything open space, but a lot of it is forest land. And that's what they think of it. I don't know what they think, but I think forest land should be mentioned specifically as well, because people underestimate the value of it.
So that's we can talk about forest land as permanently, protected forest land and then working forest land. I think there's sort of a distinction there maybe, but back to this, I think we want to focus in on maybe starting with concentrating growth in and around existing developed areas while continuing to preserve open space, sort of highlighting
reverse the order.
Yeah, highlighting the juxtaposition that's in Mansfield, that we have these nodes, but and with an underlying value of making sure that our natural resources remain healthy.
So we could say concentrate growth in and around existing developed areas while continuing to preserve open space, better management of existing natural areas. Just switch the order.
So we need to discuss within this chapter, we have an outline of everything that this chapter currently includes. And are there high-level topics that we need to add more focus on?
And to build on that, Jennifer, are there, current environmental challenges or vulnerabilities that you feel have emerged since 2015 that should be recognized?
I hear a lot about water resources, and I think Planning and Zoning Commission hears a lot about that. And, I think we need to look long-term to where we're going to get our drinking water. So that might be something we'd want to talk about.
Thanks, Jennifer.
What do we say now for water resources? Is there a slide on
You're
that?
testing me.
It's not in these slides, right?
I think water resources just really, it kind of goes over existing conditions, what we have and how we need to protect it. So I think maybe an emphasis on we're always going to need a healthy drinking water supply. And so we're going to need to protect our resources within the watersheds.
Does it make any sense to talk about climate change in this context, like building resilience to extreme events?
I think so, and we are in the process. I'm working with Jessica St. Louis as part of this climate resilience building survey. We're kind of lumping that together with the POCD. So we certainly need to incorporate our natural hazard mitigation plan into this and climate adaptation, extreme weather events.
Would it be in this chapter or someplace else?
I think in this chapter, it's where it is existing in the current plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's right at the bottom of the list. I didn't see it.
I just wanted to add, excuse me, on water resources. Forgive me if I don't, I can't recall the specific technical terms and whether this is in the existing plan, but typically water resources in POCDs and plans like this can inventory and compare the past amount of surface water in streams from 20 years ago compared to the most current data, and seeing sort of how those streams typically have shrunk, and that measure of surface water is pretty typical.
If you look at the Northwest plan, we do have information about how deep has clarified or classified our water resources, like impaired for recreation or impaired for wildlife. So I think that probably should be included here as well.
In the interest of time, I'm going to move us along. Thank you for your contributions. If things come to you after on this topic, just please shoot Jennifer a note and then we'll dig into it. Second chapter, open space, that we'll cover today. Open space, parks, and agricultural lands. Again, the layout is the same. The photos all came from your existing plan. All of this content came from your existing plan. Again, this is not something that we're proposing for the update. So here we have the topics on the right and the statements. Mansfield's open spaces and agricultural lands are a defining characteristic of what makes Mansfield a special place to live. These open spaces also contribute significantly to the rural character that is important to residents.
Just put in rural landscape.
And I would lobby again, not to be a nut job on it, honestly, but open spaces and forests.
And we do have a definition of open space in our existing plan, and we may want to
Sure, it
continue
includes
that.
forests, but when people think of open spaces, I truly don't think they think of forests. They think of when you drive down 195 and you look across whatever field that is. Oh, that's an open space property for the town down to the reservoir.
Sure, and the picture on this page reinforces what Chris has just said.
Out of curiosity, how do we define, not to say we couldn't or shouldn't update it, but what is the town's definition of, I think Jen's probably looking for it, but.
I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as a natural resource guy by original career and training. I agree with what Chris is saying. I remember being part of some focus groups and surveys that Department of Interior was doing, and I would say nationally, obviously, how you relate to your landscape and what comes to mind really does depend on where you live. Like if you live in the prairie pothole region where there's very few trees, you're not going to necessarily think about trees one way or the other. But I think if I remember the data set that I saw for basically New England, which is what we're talking about here, I think what Chris just said is borne true, that even though professionals in the field think of open space to include, it's basically undeveloped land, which could be forested, your typical person thinks more either natural fields or agricultural land, something that's largely treeless but undeveloped.
So for the current plan, we said open space is public or private property that is undeveloped or lightly developed with few or no structures. And then we define conservation land, which conservation land is open space under private or public ownership that is currently afforded some preservation status.
The problem with the phrase open space is it does not imply shade. And what Chris is saying is forests are different from open fields. And I think I agree with him. It needs to be not redefined, but added to.
Yeah, people just need to start seeing the forest. They literally don't see the forest for the open space. And even as I think Ryan just said it, when people think of farming, or if they go to, through Stearns Farm, well, a chunk of it is forest land, and it's actually in a lot of ways helps support the farm, and certainly did in historic times with the woodlot. But anyhow, thank you. I'm glad you agree, Tony.
The strangest forest I have ever been in is in the Sonora Desert, where they consider the cactuses to be trees, but there is no shade. So it's just really strange. So forest implies shade, open space implies no shade.
One of the other things that we heard, and we're hearing you, we're taking notes, and I think I agree that we could emphasize forests too as something that needs to be preserved and acknowledged within the plan. Another thing we heard from participants in these meetings that we've been holding is that there's not a real recognition of active recreation spaces within the vision. This is really focused on there's not an emphasis on the parks, which is really a piece of this chapter as well. And that my understanding is Mansfield residents pride themselves on some of their park spaces.
Can I add one more piece about the forest? I think one of the things about New England and Connecticut in particular is that it is proof that you can reforest once an area has been totally deforested, as Connecticut was. I mean, that our forests are new and need the protection for those reasons. So I like the idea of specifying forests.
One thing, I know it's been emphasized over and over, but we are going to have to integrate our new Parks and Recreation Master Plan within this chapter and also the community life chapter.
Well, I would do what I asked the town council to do. Focus on that summary. Don't go beyond the summary that's in the town council approval, the receipt, whatever that thing was that Ryan and Jay gave to us.
Okay.
Are there gaps in access to parks and open spaces?
Are there what?
Are there gaps in access to parks? I guess is the accessibility of some of these parks and open spaces a challenge?
That's something we're working on. Yeah, something we're moving toward.
That's specifically called out in the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And I think I think it's Appendix B in the current plan talks about our open space acquisition criteria. A lot of that has to do with what we consider when we acquire open space, and a lot of that has to do with connectivity.
Okay. Great. Thank you all. Community heritage and sense of place.
There it is again. Damn. I thought you guys had you told me, somebody told me this had been eliminated, and there it is.
Well, it wasn't eliminated in 2015, so we're going back to the 2000. We didn't update the 2015 plan, so
Now's the time. Now is the time. So we have again topics on the right: development forms and patterns, preserving rural character, preservation of historic and scenic resources, and accommodating future growth. The statement here: preserve the sense of place in Mansfield, the overall rural character and historic elements. Many see the need to direct any new growth to designated areas. So there's regularly this tension that's being presented, which I think is very real. Any thoughts?
It's not overall.
It's not an overall rural character, and the character of the town is distinguished by its villages, not by its absence of people.
Yeah.
So I would really try to put something about about open space punctuated by historic villages. I think that's a much better description of what is here.
And I would want to say something in here, given that zoning might look to this, that a greater density. We're just saying about we're directing new growth to areas, but it's the density of these little areas, whether it's Mansfield Center or Atwoodville or even Eagleville, that gives them their place, makes them have a place. Even whatever, I don't know all the names of them, but the one that's on Gurleyville Road, is it just Gurleyville? Yeah. The houses are dense there and they're allowed to be dense. I don't think those things would be allowed now, which is too bad.
Well, I think that's next on the list in our zoning.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
on our list.
Exactly, to allow those village centers. Within this chapter currently, my goodness, we have a lot about preserving rural character. We even define what rural character is, but we talk about using the concept of place to preserve rural character. So obviously we have to delete that character, but I think if we go back to this chapter, it's page 137 on the plan. We talk about village character. We talk about rural residential areas and protecting our natural resources. So this, and then our historic and scenic resources. It's funny, or not, maybe not funny, but when we talk about our history, we talk about kind of from the colonial period on, and I don't know if we want to talk a little bit about some pre-colonial history.
Well, do we have anywhere where we showcase it or where we want it trammeled on?
Well, we've got the project that located slave owners in town. And I'm blanking on what it's called. The middle school does it.
Yeah.
And we've also, Yukon,
The Witness Stone Project.
Project.
yes, and Yukon officially acknowledges that this land was the land of Indian populations. So maybe we ought to throw something in about that. I would like to point out that in today's community, the only places where there is a real sense of community are in developments. There are places where there are road loops of roads. You know, if you live on Jonathan Lane, for example, you have a sense of community. If you live on Mansfield City Road, you do not. So there's something about the importance of these cul-de-sacs, whether they are new or old, that contribute very significantly toward a sense of community.
That's a good point, and we should encourage that. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't live in a cul-de-sac, and I kind of, I
And you
feel
have a
like
community.
I have a sense of community.
The houses on Willowbrook are close together. That's what breeds a sense of community.
Yeah, and I guess I would just offer, because this was something, I thought, a good sidebar that we had when the department head team, the management team did this exercise. So one of the things, and obviously I wasn't here in 2015, so I don't know exactly what the conversation was, so I can't say this like definitively, but I'll say my sense, certainly based on how it's kind of conveyed in the plan, is that at the time, 2015, when the last plan came online, there was sort of this tendency to think about any form of development or, like higher density human presence as being kind of an assault on sense of place. And like, it's like, oh, the sense of place is being crowded by when it's not to say that whatever we want to call it, I know, careful about the word rural, but that these country pastoral landscapes that don't absolutely provide sense of place for this community and for many communities. But certainly I would advocate for the next plan to lean into this notion that, well, existing development, but also new forms of development, how it's done will absolutely shape, emphasize, create new sense of place that we don't have. So I think sense of place and development, that's not to say all types of development, foster a sense of place, but the right, quote unquote, intentional development can absolutely, be a boon for a sense of place.
Yeah, I completely
Good,
agree.
well
And
put.
the downtown project exemplifies that. From no place, there was no there to a there.
Maybe it's about using, again, like I'm seeing as an opportunity to use more precise language and perhaps define. So like if we're thinking about historic land use patterns, what were they characterized by? They were characterized by walkability, by mixed use, where you could go and you could, purchase goods and services near to your home, where there were employment options that were nearby. And I'm not saying that that's applicable in all of these different nodes that you're talking about, or, say the cul-de-sac. But I think if we can define sort of what those elements are that create the community in those types, those land use, in those geographies, I think we would be better off.
And this chapter currently focuses in on a lot of our we have these historic districts, which are, they come under the jurisdiction of the Historic District Commission, but we also have these historic villages. And so it's really hard from a zoning perspective right now to protect that. So I think that's something we need to focus in on, are these village centers. So
Are we ready for community life?
We're ready.
All right, fantastic. So do you want us to cover all the chapters? This is good conversation. We really appreciate it. So again, topics included in this chapter on the right, the statement here in the existing plan. The range and quality of community services provided by the town is highly valued by Mansfield residents, but many have concerns about the ability of the town to continue funding the high level of service and programs offered today, much less expanding services given the potential impact of taxpayers.
I don't think we have that level of concern, because at those point we had a much lower level of state funding, and also we have the development that we have created since 2015 that gives us a much more secure tax base, and potentially will shift the burden from residential owners to more toward the commercial, commercial development. So I'm not sure I want this to be quite so pessimistic.
Yeah, it seems like we felt we were poor back then. We
Well,
were.
there were
I guess.
years when we thought we were going to have to cut millions out of the budget, but it never
That may
occurred.
come again,
It
honestly.
may come again, yeah.
I am wondering about trying to make it a little more vague in the first one, and by that I mean more accurate. The range and quality community sort of highly valued. It's highly valued, and it's not just Mansfield residents that value it. We have people come to use the community center. We have people, other towns use our ball fields. Other people come and use our open space.
Our library.
Yep.
So perhaps language that we often see is by individuals who live, work, play, study, or live, work, play, learn in town. That's like somewhat inclusive. Maybe we don't need all those words, but yes, it's bigger. The reach of your community services goes beyond Mansfield residents. I was impressed with how many individuals had come to visit from out of town to visit for Mansfield Tomorrow. That was a really nice event.
When I think of Mansfield as a community and services and activities as a community, I think of the university. I mean, a good proportion of the things that I do involve the university. And I wonder if that's here or if we should have a separate chapter on Mansfield as a university town.
5 years later, we can do that in 5 years.
I sort of feel like we want to, by separating out the university, we're not making it integral to who we are, maybe.
Then maybe put it integral here.
Yeah, I would say again, this was the other, I think, theme that came up in the department head discussion in terms of, the evolution I've seen in the last handful of years, that we don't want to, I don't think we want to talk about UConn as like a separate thing. There's us and UConn. I think we want to frame it as this is an integrated kind of ecosystem, shared goals. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be certain things where there's sort of, I would say, separate interests, but whatever you want to call that. I mean, but the plan, I think, and Ron, you actually made, I think, a great point earlier that kind of conspicuously absent, in the vision and talking about who we are, is Yukon. I mean, Yukon is such a defining characteristic of what makes Mansfield, the Mansfield that we know. And I just think, since especially we're trying so hard working with Yukon to collaborate on different things, shared goals, shared interests, that we want the plan to, reflect that progress.
When I talk about the benefits of living in Mansfield, one of the things I've begun to talk about, and I realized it's a real change, is we have world-class sports that are available to the public. We have world-class music and art and theater that is available to the public at a really reduced price. We have a diversity of our community, which would only have happened because people have work at the university. We have demands on our schools and our libraries, which exist only because we are a highly educated community, because people work at the university. So it seems to me that community life has really got to include some of this stuff.
Great. Yeah.
And by the way, the other thing that we need to talk about is the quality of the arts in our community. We have more music, more arts makers than almost any other place I've ever been.
Can I suggest that this sentence be reduced to the range and quality of community services in the town is highly valued by all, period.
Excellent. Excellent.
I like
Yeah, I'll just say that friends of ours who are older and retired made a checklist and had a bunch of places that they might have gone, and they decided to stay here for the very reasons that we've just been saying. And they could have gone. And it was basically Yukon was the pull.
How do people feel about giving a shout out to Eastern? Because that does, I mean, a lot of people who, or it used to be that a lot of people who work at Eastern also live in Mansfield, and they add to the fabric of the community.
Well, does it need a shout out any more than if Yukon's not getting a shout out? Why does it get a shout out?
Well, if we're going to do one for Yukon, we ought to do one for Eastern.
I
Does it
mean,
have the same goal?
clearly Yukon has a much bigger impact to our community than Eastern, but the fact that we are proximate to two universities, I think
Yes.
adds to who we are.
I would agree.
And
Okay.
a community college.
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move to the next chapter. Thank you all, unless there's any final words on this. Okay. Hearing none, diversifying the economy. Chapters included, bottom right-hand corner of the slide. I will read the statement. There is a need for balanced managed economic growth without compromising the rural character. Residents acknowledge that growth in the commercial tax base could help compensate for declining state revenues and homeowner tax burden. Seems like you, as you mentioned, Tony, have worked to address that. However, there are concerns about potential impacts of new growth on the community.
Well, there's still people who are afraid that these new developments at Four Corners will ruin their lives. I will say, and Ron, you can testify to this certainly, that the development in Storrs Center did not ruin the community immediately adjacent to it.
Not at all. We put a sign up though saying Willowbrook residents only for our street so that nobody would drive in, but no, has had no impact.
I've ignored it,
Negative
by
impact,
the way,
yeah.
Ron, just for the record.
The police told us don't expect 24/7 enforcement, and
It's
did not expect
it's unenforceable.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So
It's a-
if you go to if you look at for this chapter, page 217, I know we all don't have the plan, but it says we have guiding economic development. We have like a framework to guide economic development in Mansfield. Talks about preserving our rural character while providing a healthy economy that supports essential public services like schools. It emphasizes sustainable development, supporting business that are already established, focusing new business development and expansion efforts on high impact, high value businesses such as research and development, professional business services, small scale products, citing new businesses, preferably on land that is already, so basically redevelopment, already developed or zoned for commercial development. So I could go on, but I sort of feel like this captures a lot. Support sustainable productive agriculture, forestry, farmland preservation for farmland restoration. Focusing in again on the agricultural economy, establish flexibility in land use and business regulations that supports entrepreneurship and new business development, sustain the community's cultural and natural assets through appropriately focused and scaled tourism, which I hear a lot about, kind of highlighting our recreational assets, expand retail and consumer services focused on meeting the needs of local residents and workers, and on drawing visitors, highlighting us as a tourism destination again, developing and attracting, retaining talented workforce to support innovation, job creation, and new businesses, collaborate regionally where working with adjacent communities through regional entities has the potential to achieve economic synergies and protect the water resources that economic growth depends on. I feel like that's
huge. Jen, two questions. Do you think that the Connecticut countryside cooperation with the four towns is going to go anywhere? That's one question. The second question is the development of an arts district going to go anywhere?
I think both of those will be.
Yeah, I let me just chime in here. So admittedly, both efforts that the mayor just referenced, which had, I guess you could say been kind of moving along at a sort of reasonable pace. That one's a regional effort, one's more of a directly local effort. And so we did have a departure in the director of the downtown partnership a little less than a year ago. And now that we have a new director who just started this week, I fully expect forward momentum on both of those fronts, particularly the cultural district. I think re-engaging with that. I think we are kind of reevaluating our involvement in the four town effort and trying to make sure that there's definitely value in continuing to be engaged in the same way, but a lot of that really just came down to staff bandwidth and capacity. And now that we have a new director, I think we're going to re-engage pretty actively.
Both of those are economic development efforts, and I think that there ought to be some acknowledgement of both programs, specifically if we are going to talk about diversifying the economy. One of them has a tourism emphasis, the other has a development of an arts community emphasis, which would also be regional, but with a real specific focus on providing opportunities for local artists.
Fantastic. Thank you for calling that out, Mayor.
I just jotted down a couple things, and I know we can't spend too much time, but redevelopment, our agricultural economy, research and development, we don't really have any zone where we allow research and development, so we need to look at that. Arts and culture, which combined with recreation really kind of highlights us as a tourism destination. And then, and that's basically all
on this one, do you plan to use the same text in the beginning? Excising rural character, but otherwise?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think we need to hear from you all what the priorities are. Jen just listed some of them, the ways in which.
So I object to only because, well, for a couple of reasons, but I don't think managed economic growth is anything like what the town does or can do.
Chris, apologies, I missed that. You don't think that?
I don't think that term. There's a need for balanced managed economic growth. There's no mechanism in our around here to manage our own economic growth unless we were to really decide we are going to make a major our own opportunity zone and really go at it or something like that. I just don't think that's happening.
I wonder if the development of stores was thought at some point to be considered a managed effort.
Yeah, I don't think
I'm
that's an
hearing what you're
economic
saying,
growth
but-
thing. I think that was a pitch. The tax income was a pitch for it. It was mostly a cultural desire, again, a need of a desire to have a place was the real
Okay.
push there. But this is a topic for others that weren't there that came up. The idea of having a light industrial area. And that made me think of working with UConn and getting Depot Campus as that kind of a place where they invited people in, as they seem to say they want to do on Discovery Drive. At least that was one of the earlier versions that I understood. That innovation building was supposed to be the spark, and then other things will pop up around it. So now it seems like it's a research site for wherever your business is in Norwalk or Waterbury or anywhere. So anyhow, I think we could mention something here or think about working with UConn because they've got the land, they've got some infrastructure on the Depot campus. It's at the intersection of two larger roads. So anyhow, it's a thought, but I'm not pushing
Thanks,
hard.
Chris.
I think I'd have to agree with Chris. And economists find the word managed to be a loaded word. It's a little bit like character.
Okay, noted. All right, I'm going to move us along. So we have, Jennifer, 4 chapters: housing, future land use, infrastructure, and stewardship. I'm proposing that we skip the future land use, as that is sort of a reflection of all the work that goes into all of these other chapters. If you object, Jennifer, let me know.
Yeah, we can try that. I think right, that's fine.
Okay. So for housing, simple statement, or really short statement, concise. Residents expressed interest in having a larger variety of housing options, both in design and levels of affordability.
Does anybody want to talk about assisted living or housing for seniors?
Sure, we'd be open to it. I mean, open to mentioning it on here. We'd certainly be open to having it. We've been trying to get one
For years.
for years. So sure.
It may
No.
be in the details, but
What we've heard in our discussions is that there is a strong desire for diverse housing types, and also affordable housing types. So I will acknowledge that. And then, tied to population, there's sort of as Jennifer's mentioned, missing middle in the population. Perhaps that's due to a missing middle in the housing types that are available within the community. So I think we'll address some of that within this. Will be addressed within this chapter.
but there is a real problem for seniors.
And so,
People
Mayor, that's
literally-
also
People literally have to leave town. There are communities of Mansfield residents in Suffield and West Hartford because there are senior housing communities there.
Yep. Thank you. And some of that is, like, for the housing chapter, a lot of this is going to be looking at the population trends, and also some of the projections. So it is, you do have an aging population. And yes, it's important to have places for people to go. And if you do, then it also can lessen the burden on some of the single family homes that then could be potentially opened up for, others in the community, or others who desire to come to the community.
Just one quick thing about the senior housing thing, because every developer I ever meet with, I talk about doing some age-restricted housing, at least a portion. And we have to talk about the market realities of this. It's just not, they're any kind of, when you're adding any restriction to any kind of development, it makes it harder for financing. So I don't know how we address this in the plan, but it's a hard thing to do. Unless it's a different form, like, kind of a graduated situation where you're moving from independent to assisted living. And that would be kind of more of an institutional use, I think, so.
Is it within this chapter that we would talk about the issue of non-campus student housing?
Yes, on campus student,
Not on.
Off campus.
off
Off
campus.
campus.
Okay. Yes, and this chapter highlights all of the things that we're doing with our housing code, our rental registration program, enforcement, definition of family.
All those are kind of negative. Anything about, like, we're building some, others are building some positive student housing options.
I don't believe that is in the current plan, but that's, yeah, a framing of what's happening that we could include.
It has to be. That's the major economic development in town, is housing that is multifamily, but particularly designed to accommodate young people.
Okay. All right, in the interest of time, we've heard a lot from this group in other meetings and also from other individuals about housing. It is a hot topic and we will be digging into it. Here's the land use chapter. And Jennifer, if you're okay, I'm just gonna move through this because
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
okay. Because it really does, it is the reflection of all of the input and analysis that goes into the other chapters. Infrastructure, here we have the topics on the right. And this is, because it covers a lot and very important, important piece of the functionality of the community. We have the physical infrastructure needs to support the vision of a sustainable, resilient community, including transportation, water and wastewater facilities, energy systems, and waste management. Access to multiple modes of transportation and connections are highly valued by Mansfield residents. Residents also voiced a strong desire to preserve the rural and natural character of the town, something that is inextricably linked to the type and location of infrastructure. The concept of sustainability also found strong support, though there were disagreements in the details.
Listen, we still have people who are fighting over whether their road should be paved or not. So you heard from a specific group of people. I know there are a lot of people who like the fact that their houses can't be seen from the road or are surrounded by land which was once farmland. And that needs to be preserved. I don't mean to object to that. But again, this is not a community that wants a hospital an hour away or to have to drive 45 minutes to go grocery shopping. It wants open landscape. People complain that they have to drive everywhere. So a rural community has to drive everywhere, but people complain about it. So there's some things that they want and some things that they don't want. Multiple modes of transportation require that we have buses on back roads, and we can't do that. So I don't know how to deal with this one, except to please talk about landscape rather than character.
One thing I know that when we talk about infrastructure, we often, gravitate towards transportation, road infrastructure. First and foremost, and that makes sense. It certainly is, highly relevant and front and center in the minds of our residents. One thing, Jen and I have talked about that really needs to, I think, have more focus, be called out more directly in this section where, as far as changes over the last 10 years, is the water and sewer component, because as we've grown and as we have developments now that have been approved and will eat into the capacity of our existing water and sewer infrastructure, we basically, we are at capacity. In fact, we might be over capacity, so this isn't like, sort of a down the road afterthought, let's mention water and sewer. I mean, it's actually highly relevant, and from a capacity standpoint, something that we really need to work out moving forward.
Well, so we're at capacity or over capacity in the northwest portion. I think there is capacity down in southern Mansfield, but regardless, this is going to dictate how we grow and where we grow. And So I think it just needs to be dealt with directly.
Okay, thank you.
And specifically, we may need to create our own waste processing systems.
And find additional sources of water.
Well, UConn's gonna have to do something with their wastewater treatment plant in the next 10 years because it's out of date. So whether that becomes a regional system or not, I mean, there's chance for growth there, but if you don't get the water, it doesn't matter.
Thanks, John.
Because the water agreement that UConn has with Connecticut Water was not, I don't think, what the town thought they were getting in 2015. UConn has control of all that water in the pipe.
Huh.
All the water, John?
That basically they say they have a certain capacity and it's theirs, and they're not even using it because we used to use all their well water, and now that's been diverted. We use the water, some of the water in that pipeline, but the majority of it is in reserve for UConn.
Yeah, we get 350,000 gallons per day. UConn gets 1.5 million. We are over capacity at that 350,000.
And they have yet to use any of that, from what I understand, the last time talking to Connecticut Water. So it's just held in reserve.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
And on the road transportation, there's been a change. I've been here 11 years, so I can tell you the change since we started paving roads. People want roads paved, and since complete streets came around, more people moving into town want walkable communities. They don't want they don't care if you take the stone wall out and put in a walkway. So there's a shift from 10 years of what people used to want in Mansfield and what the newer people want. Not saying they're the majority, it's just there's been a shift.
Thank you, John. And that aligns with what we've been hearing in our other discussions as well. Okay, we are very close to time here. So this is the last chapter, and then I'll quickly let you know about next steps. So we have implementation. Again, chapters on the right. Residents expressed in the statement, residents expressed concern about the town's ability to pay for initiatives without placing undue financial burden on taxpayers. The relationship between the town and university is seen as key to achieving the community's goals. Many expressed a desire for more responsive, transparent government, including improved communications regarding town initiatives and the ability for two-way dialogue.
So we have received awards for having the most transparent government because of our website and the fact that our budgets are online. I would rather say that the town continues to be committed to expanding transparency and being responsive.
Okay.
The sentence, the relationship between the town and university is seen as key to achieving the community's goals. That's sort of like, we need to highlight that a little bit more throughout the whole plan, as that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The fact is that this whole plan is asking UConn to achieve the level of service that the town wants without acknowledging the contributions that the university already makes to the town.
Yeah.
The second thing, Tony, about the transparency and so forth, I mean, that's fine when people expressed it, and I think they always will. But what's I just don't know how to handle that kind of thing where, in fact, there are mechanisms that exist already for, and people don't like the responses always is really the problem. People find out about things after they thought they should, even though it was the first time they were ever mentioned. And they don't think, then they say it's not transparent. Improved communications, somehow, as hard as you try, you can't get to everybody. But but I think if the town is available, open, and so forth, which might include being open 5 days a week, and I'm not trying to grind anything there, but it might. It would help in some of this stuff. So I struggle with this, the complaint kind of side of this, when the town hasn't been hiding things. It's not trying to go anywhere. I'm talking too long. I think we get the idea.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, rest assured, this is not unique to Mansfield. And I think, yeah, there's an opportunity to highlight some of the work that you're doing to be transparent. Okay. Anything else on implementation? Because I'm going to jump to Mayor.
Just one comment. There was a complaint during the development of the downtown that people didn't have an opportunity, and Cynthia said there had been 100 meetings and public hearings to which nobody came, and literally 100. She counted. So it's hard to say you aren't being transparent when nobody shows up to a publicly announced meeting.
So I will go back on what I said a tiny bit. You just reminded me, and I think it comes up. Is there another slide where I think that I think that we must provide a build out map to show what would happen if the zoning rules were followed and the entire town was built out. I think it should be required. That's what blew people away at Four Corners. They had no idea what was going to be allowed. Now, had we shown it, had it been visible and clear on the website with posters here and there, would we have gotten a response? My answer is probably not much. Probably wait until it was built, and then people would say the same thing that we hear now, which is, I didn't know about that. But in any case, I think we need to do that. I think I've been saying this for, I don't know, a couple of years. But we really need to do that. It needs to be evident that we know where this these zoning rules, where the ship is going, what the navigation is, where it's taking us.
Thanks, Chris. Okay.
Ron wanted to say.
I just wanted to offer a general comment. Is there any possibility of giving some thought to changing the rank ordering of the chapters? Making, for example, natural systems and open space instead of 2 and 3, 6 and 7. I haven't recommended, but it just kind of seems to emphasize things by putting them up front more than perhaps we wish to.
Speak really quickly. I know we're at the end of time. We intentionally put natural systems and open space at the beginning, because the thought is that you have to look at your natural environment before you move into the built environment. So the plan is sort of structured, and maybe it comes across as the fact that we need to protect and not build and kind of we're obstructionists, but at the same time, your built environment really is dictated a lot by the natural features and the fact that we are a lot of wetlands, steep slopes, and rocks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay. So very quickly, we are in the midst of very active engagement process and period. So we're in March. This is our second working group meeting. Looking out ahead, we have our next working group meeting. We're targeting the first week of June. First week of June. So we'll be, I'm sorry, this is the ad hoc committee. Please forgive me. But we're going to be meeting with the working group at the beginning of June. At that point, we're going to have draft recommendations. We're going to continue to meet with you monthly. So we're going to be moving along with this process. You're going to, hear what we learn, we'll feedback what we heard at the workshop, at the survey, or through the survey. And yeah, we're going to start plugging this all into a plan so that we can deliver some recommendations to this group and to the working groups for review and input before we move into September. In terms of current focus, we're continuing to analyze the benchmarking results. We got a lot of input, particularly from the boards, committees, and commissions. So we're going through that, pairing it with what we're hearing from these exercises, our visioning exercises, and then also the survey and the upcoming meeting, the upcoming workshop. We're preparing for that public workshop, which will be held April 5th. So we hope to see you all there. And if you could help us spread the word, that would be fantastic. We would really like to get a great turnout. The more people that participate and provide input, the stronger the plan is, because it's more reflective of the diversity of, opinions within the community. So please help us with that if you at all can.
Can you all ask 10 friends to complete the survey?
And have them ask 10 friends.
And have them
What's
ask
the
10
goal?
friends, and so
What's
on
your-
and so on.
What's your number goal? Is it a percentage you're after?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, as many as people, I'd like to see, for the affordable housing plan, we had about 650. So I'd love to see 1,000 to 1,200. I think that would be great.
Okay.
Those of us that have done social science research know that it's difficult to get high numbers.
Yep. Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. at the Mansfield Middle School.
We also know that the low numbers can be skewed.
Okay.
Thank you all.
We are adjourned at 10:36 a.m. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you all for your
Tony,
time.
Telly,
Thank
and
you all
Laura.
very
Thanks.
much.
Thank you all. We really
care,
appreciate it.
everyone.
Bye.